Li Haotian suddenly felt a headache coming on, as if his whole body was about to fall apart. Li Haotian could die at any moment. I'm afraid it won't be long before I can achieve financial freedom and return to my hometown, which is a 7th-tier city. As he sensed the original owner's memories and the power of his body after the X gene awakened, he immediately made some guesses. There's even a one-hit kill system where you can instantly level up to 999 by killing an enemy with a single blow. If used properly, it would be an absolutely powerful existence. Just then, a girl with long flaxen hair walked over, carrying a water cup and a warm damp towel. With her delicate features and lovely face, she was a popular young beauty, with many suitors at Xavier Academy. This made Katie, who was on good terms with him, a little worried. Even if you don't really want to time travel, there's no need to waste energy on things that have already happened. We will absolutely not give in and admit defeat like this. This first system is crucial and important. After all, who could resist a pretty and kind-hearted young woman? Anyone who can activate the X gene in their body can become a mutant. Li Haotian's mutant ability, disposable human fireworks, is officially recognized as the weakest in first mutant ability. Li Haotian's original X gene was extremely powerful. Even if it wasn't the strongest Omega level, it was at least Alpha level. If used properly, it can be an extremely powerful ability. A series of systems, comes possessed by protagonists in novels and comics I had read before, flashed through my mind. The increase in energy cannot be so instantaneous, and level 999 requires a reference point to be considered 999. But what is one? Li Haotian was worried that his secret would be discovered by the other party. The system has been successfully created, just like that? At that moment, Professor X's brow twitched slightly, and he looked at Li Haotian with some surprise, but he spoke gently. Upon hearing Professor X's words, Li Haotian gave an awkward smile, appearing somewhat embarrassed. The other party's telepathic abilities are truly powerful. If you have any questions, you can ask me anytime. Get back in shape soon and join our activities, Professor X said. Li Haotian took a deep breath and thought to himself, at that time, all I was thinking about was preventing Professor X from telepathically reading my inner secrets. That feeling, the Sunbathing to be stronger system has achieved success. What was previously just a guess, a barely successful attempt at creating a system, has now been completely mastered. If it is exhausted, it will take time to recover. The system that becomes stronger by sleeping can sleep all day long. Soon, Li Haotian arrived at the cafeteria based on his memory. He had seen the movie many times, but this was the first time he had seen it in person. I really have no idea how much money the professor has. Just then a teenage girl with black hair walked over. After all, wherever there are people, there is a world of its own. Li Haotian has seen X-Men, Days of Future Past. Li Haotian smiled and waved, then walked towards Clarice. Li Haotian was really not used to it. It seemed that no one had ever offered to sit with her, which made Clarice suddenly appear somewhat flustered. Fortunately, she didn't grow up to be ugly and is still very beautiful. Li Haotian noticed Clarice's nervousness, so he smiled and extended his hand. Hello. My name is Clarice Ferguson. Li Haotian smiled at Clarice and then began to eat. Is there something on my face? This is the age when one should be in junior high school. Didn't I already say I wanted to be friends with you? Li Haotian immediately stood up and said no more. Then the next day, everyone went back to their own homes and to their own mothers. My X gene, although I suspect was created by the rules. The evolution of life is a long journey. Thanks to this ability, Li Haotian became increasingly addicted to looking at these data. You will then discover how magnificent and wonderful this is. No wonder when I read novels before, once the protagonists had a system, they could dominate everything and everything. If you had no experience before, wouldn't it be easier to strengthen your breathing? In this way, Li Haotian is truly getting stronger every moment. According to the book, the X gene of mutants actually has an upper limit. The settings in the comics are actually quite perverse. It can cause a special change in all the cells of Li Haotian's body under sunlight. Li Haotian became several times stronger after just reading for a short while. The sunshine is nice, it looks like we can edit a little longer. I didn't notice it because I was so engrossed in reading. At this point in time, he should still be in elementary school. Li Haotian has become increasingly familiar with Xavier College. The power of rules within my body seems to have recovered somewhat. Li Haotian later became the renowned Spider-Man. Even my reaction, speed and thinking ability have improved significantly. Now is the time to enjoy yourself. While they might not be able to beat elementary school students, they could beat some strong junior and strong senior high school students. He was astute. So, although I felt an explosive surge of energy within me, my eyesight was also incredibly good. Li Haotian glanced around and saw that almost all the gym equipment was available. I remember that I used to be able to lift a 60-pound barbell. I feel an explosive power within me. I could kill a bull with a single punch. For a moment, Li Haotian had no time to react. I wanted to test my strength, but I didn't expect it to be so strong that I couldn't hold on. Compared to when she was in the cafeteria and library, she seemed less demure and more eerie and energetic. The professor said that physical health is very important. Just then, 3 uninvited guests walked in from outside. Jason, 15 years old. His mutant ability is a power boost. All 3 of them were in the same class as Clarice. In his past life, he was bullied for reporting a school bully. After all, he is nearly 30 years old across both lifetimes. At this moment, Clarice spoke up anxiously. At that moment, 14-year-old Yorkney, standing next to him, suddenly revealed a cruel smile that was incongruous with his age. After all, it is the responsibility of the teachers at Xavier College to teach them how to be good people. You will absolutely not allow me to insult him. Li Haotian had long regarded Li Haotian as his best friend, or even his only friend. I've said it before, I don't like hearing those 3 words. Jason is a power mutant, while Li Haotian is a newcomer, who can't even lift a 100-pound dumbbell. It wasn't until this moment that he realized that, without him noticing, his head had been slapped off. Even so, Li Haotian slapped him so hard his head flew off and he was dragged a long way away. It now seems very likely that the other party is a power-type mutant, just like me. Li Haotian's mutant ability is canine transformation. Although he is not a pure strength-type mutant, you can hit him, but he can withstand it. Moreover, they didn't hold back from the start, and went all out. A single punch can deal 5 tons of damage. That's an incredibly terrifying force. Li Haotian instinctively raised his hand and threw a plunge, slamming it down hard. Clarice, who considers Li Haotian her only friend, absolutely cannot accept this scene, nor can she bear to see him become disabled. Jason's right arm twisted grotesquely, with the forearm bones piercing through the skin and muscles exposed. Li Haotian's eyes were filled with horror and fear. Such terrifying power has now been defeated by this seemingly frail, yellow-skinned man before them. Even with professors keeping things under control at Xavier College, no murder will actually happen. According to what I remember, Jason is a pure strength-type mutant, so it seems I should have close to 10 tons of strength. Li Haotian was very satisfied with the result. Just then, a man and a woman walked into the training field. This is not because she is a teacher at the academy and cannot openly intervene. I hope you can always stay true to your original aspirations and never be consumed by the power of mutants. According to what the professor said a few days ago, Li Haotian seems to have the ability to block out mental perception. Even in schools, there are people who possess more than 2 abilities. I think we can suggest to the professor that Li Haotian be included in the list of X-Men interns. Clearly, Li Haotian's strength and character have earned the approval of both of them. I'm the one who should be saying thank you. Li Haotian shook his head helplessly, but he was secretly delighted. Then, using the power of the rules that had been partially restored within his body, he began to create attribute templates. As expected, my strength has exceeded 10 tons. The speed is a bit lacking, only about 10 times that of an average person. Li Haotian possesses the powerful X gene, yet is unable to use his mutant abilities. Moreover, once his power of rules is fully accumulated, Li Haotian will be able to create a new system again. After creating the attribute panel, Li Haotian suddenly realized that he had nothing left to do. Time passed little by little, and another day went by, in the blink of an eye. All you need to do is watch more action, movies and battles between strong characters. After all, he has only been a mutant for a short time, and his mastery of the X gene is not yet proficient. Can I please give it a shout out? At this moment he sat in his wheelchair looking out the window, with Storm Aurora beside him. Are you wondering why I did this? The professor slowly turned his head and looked at Li Haotian. In fact, he had only one goal from beginning to end. After all, his parents are still alive. The current Li Haotian is far from good enough. Clearly, Li Haotian's appearance is different from that of most of the people he studied, or they will infinitely amplify the dark side of the past. Be the one who wields power, not the one who is wielded by power. Rather, he is a person with his own principles who strives to uphold his beliefs. So it turns out he didn't not want to kill, but rather needed a white glove. Lee Haotian increasingly felt how terrifying the professor was. I called you over because I was worried that you might have too many thoughts and develop mental problems. After all, the professor's strength is a recurring theme throughout the entire X-Men series. After all, inside that place, one can more accurately monitor their own strength and attribute data. Few other mutants can match their abilities. This is what he fears most right now. Lee Haotian's X gene is indeed strong. I'm sorry, Master, my power is too weak. Moreover, I am improving every day, and the defense of the mental shielding system will come and stronger, as long as their mental strength doesn't far surpass his. Even if it's several times greater, he can still withstand it. Hearing the professor's words, Lee Haotian felt an even greater chill in his heart. Lee Haotian nodded politely and then left the professor's office. The professor's eyes flickered, and he smiled as he looked in the direction Lee Haotian had left. The gears of fate will eventually put everything back in its place. Just now when he went out, Jason and the other two greeted him very warmly. The power of the mind is indeed terrifying. The lecture was a long one, but the content wasn't particularly profound. So the content of the class was rather cheerful, lacking the usual somber and dull topics found in regular classes. Lee Haotian simply found a quiet spot by the window and enjoyed the invigorating feeling of basking in the sun. I never imagined that so many years after graduation, I would be back in the classroom again. Looking at beautiful women will help you live longer. At this moment, Clarice put away her notebook, came to Lee Haotian, and said with a smile, "The story goes that two corn kernels got married, but the next morning, the male corn kernels discovered that the female corn kernel was missing. Before we knew it, it was time for afternoon classes. Everyone has gone to the training ground. Not long after, the two arrived at the training ground, on a small platform not far away. Storm was speaking. Only those who know how to harness power can live better in this world." Storm Girl smiled and looked at everyone as she finished speaking. Only by fully mastering one's own power can one be qualified to become an X-Men. I, Storm and Iceman will be your sparring partners. Lee Haotian based his observations on the original owner's memories and the news he had gathered. Lee Haotian looked over and saw a burly man covered in metal walk up. Iceman Bobby smiled and immediately pressed his hands down on the ground. It seems this place will need to be repaired afterward. Lee Haotian has made rapid progress these days. Skin resilience, muscle strength and so on are also very strong. Especially since this ice ball contains terrifying freezing power, it is no less powerful than an ordinary cannonball. They are all very skilled, and their power is considerable. Otherwise, there is a high chance of things going wrong. The opponent was indeed strong, and the two sides fought evenly. Don't worry, I have many other methods prepared for you. Seeing this, Lee Haotian's expression turned strange. Poppy the Iceman has started to dominate Colossus. Apart from that, their defenses are roughly the same. So how will Lee Haotian deal with Poppy the Iceman, whose powerful ice control abilities are like those of a Zachust? Lee Haotian could roughly estimate that, under normal circumstances, Iceman Bobby, there is no sign of decline yet. This will help us fight side by side in the future. You two are very good, especially Colossus. Cyclops, Scott immediately stepped forward and gave his comments to the two of them. While not as convenient as the Night Stalker's teleportation, it is faster. They were thrown into chaos and immediately lost their fighting ability. After all, how can the fight scenes we've seen in movies and TV shows compare to the sheer spectacle of this real-life scene? In particular, he possesses mental strength 63 times greater than that of ordinary people, which allows him to have an almost photographic memory. There are far more than what he has seen in movies and to TV shows. You two are both power-type mutants, and I hope this will be beneficial to you. Of course, this is only true for the present moment. This is something that Colossus cannot compare to. Clarice, who was standing next to him, immediately cheered Lee Haotian on. Kitty the Phantom Cat spoke up from the side. Others might not know, but Clarice did. Lee Haotian's power was immense. This world is dangerous, and he never wanted to be the first to stick his neck out. Before she met the professor, she was often bullied. Aurora highly recommended you, believing that your potential is no less than mine. Lee Haotian also wanted to know just how strong he was now. Lee Haotian didn't try to test the waters. Instead, he went all out from the start. The combined force of these 21 tons, when concentrated into a single punch, is even more powerful than a cannonball. Known for his strength, he is like a steel tank, Li Haotian said in a buzzing voice. This was the first time they had ever seen someone actually fighting with Colossus. This is what a battle between men should be like. They were completely unaware of this wonderful scenery. As the two entered a heated phase, Li Haotian's well-rounded attributes began to emerge. This means that the longer the time goes on, the smaller the gap between Li Haotian and Ganglishity will become. You are the first and the only one. This material is not steel. Its hardness is second only to adamantium alloy and vibranium. This formidable defensive capability made Li Haotian quite tired during the battle. Now we all know Xavier Academy. You two are tough guys. Colossus had already been added to the X-Men list. Many people have even come to regard Li Haotian as their idol. It is progress that they can see. Li Haotian was just a student like them, and he had never shown any talent before. It may not even have much effect. Scott felt he would feel bad if he didn't say something. Kitty the Phantom Cat walked over and said excitedly, the battle just now had indeed taken a toll on Li Haotian's stamina. It must be said that Xavier College's dining hall is quite good. This made the other person blush to the roots of their ears. After all, strictly speaking, this was Li Haotian's first battle after becoming a mutant. This shows that my combat awareness is still somewhat lacking, and I should work on improving my talent in this area. 5 more days of this kind of life have passed in the blink of an eye. Clarice, standing next to him, was diligently taking notes, while occasionally stealing glances at Li Haotian. Otherwise, Clarice would have been so embarrassed that she would have dug a hole and crawled into it. Li Haotian was overjoyed, and a hint of excitement flashed in his eyes. Li Haotian had been thinking about this for a long time. Li Haotian immediately began creating the system with ease. The one-punch invincible system has failed to be created. You have obtained the character template, Kakarot Son Goku. Once the inheritance process improves, Li Haotian's power will also increase. We no longer need to have power but be unable to use it. Not only did it satisfy his desire to improve his strength, but the subsequent transformations, Furtars of power, were also full of special effects. It seemed that Li Haotian had been smiling ever since the start of class. After spending half a morning in the sun, his progress had increased from 5% to 6.3%. If he wanted, he could sense everyone in the entire Xavier Academy instantly. After all, in the comics, Poppy the Iceman can even freeze the world, and Ororo the Storm can control the Earth's atmosphere. A smile returned to Li Haotian's face. There are also Super Saiyan 1, 2, 3, and 4 forms. Super Saiyan God Red, Super Saiyan Blue, and so on. Clarice was taken aback, somewhat confused by Katie's meaning. The handsomeness of Eastern men is simply incomparable to that of Western men. This also made Li Haotian marvel at the professor's other ability to make money. Clarice felt upset when she heard that the other party had invited Li Haotian to go to the movies. For a moment, she felt a little uncomfortable, and her nose even started to sting. The afternoon sun is the most comfortable. Otherwise, it will only slow down the speed at which I become stronger. Katie immediately took Li Haotian's words as excuse to refuse. To become stronger, you must work hard. This unexpected gratitude left Li Haotian somewhat bewildered. In an instant, Li Haotian felt like he had become a completely different person. It seems as if it could transform into a great river, a mighty river, or even eventually flow into the boundless ocean at any moment. Li Haotian suddenly had an idea and opened the attribute panel of the inherited character. It's important to understand that Super Saiyan and Saiyans are completely different concepts. Finally, we have the power to protect ourselves. After all, mutants' abilities are complex and varied, no less powerful than superpowers. If you don't have any intelligence, you could very well be killed in one blow on your first encounter. The Super Saiyan 1 form has 4 stages. Regardless, Li Haotian's strength has increased at least 100-fold after unlocking the Super Saiyan form. By the way, although Super Saiyans are powerful, they cannot survive in space. These people were not as strong as Kakarot in his later stages. Previously, although Li Haotian was powerful, it was only in terms of pure strength. Li Haotian took a deep breath to calm himself down. In any case, mutant abilities are diverse, complex, and illogical. Clarice immediately asked excitedly, her big eyes blinking with curiosity. I never expected that you would awaken a new ability. See, I just happened to pass by and discovered Li Haotian, who was engulfed in golden flames. Looks like I can ask the professor. Soon everyone arrived at Professor X's office. Li Haotian looked at Li Haotian and said, Lee, I heard you've awakened a new energy-based ability. With so many people around, the professor could easily invade someone's mind and see their transformation through that person's eyes. Lee Haotian, who can transform into Super Saiyan 1, can use all the techniques mentioned above. Lee Haotian had sensed that energy earlier, and it was extremely powerful. The ability of the X gene to awaken a second time is very rare. In fact, even the professors were somewhat unsure. Could it be an infinite body enhancement system? This is the infinite body enhancement system. I know Scott and Bobby, but who is Kane? Scott and Lee Haotian then left the office. Upon hearing this, Lee Haotian's heart stirred, and he began to look forward to it. As they were talking, Scott dragged Lee Haotian to the training ground. Based on Scott's earlier statement, it's quite clear that it was Mr. After all, the golden flames that were burning earlier didn't seem very strong. Filled with anticipation, Lee Haotian took a deep breath. Even without transforming, my current base speed is already 200 ms/s, which is not far from the speed of sound. A single punch could shatter a mountain. Lee Haotian's body was slammed to the ground and dragged for more than 10 meters. Just how much impact can it generate? Hey Lee, when you fought Colossus last time, you were about the same as him, maybe 20 tons of force, right? I'm afraid that punch just now would have made me lose consciousness. Or use your newly awakened energy-based power to resist. This is what Lee Haotian was hoping for. Lee Haotian had absolute confidence in his laser eyes. Scott was stunned when he saw this. Lee Haotian has actually brought him a life-or-death crisis. After all, in his view, the two most powerful mutants right now are Professor X and Magneto. Lee Haotian immediately felt the energy within his body. Lee Haotian stared at Lee Haotian in utter shock. Inside the training ground, Lee Haotian was engulfed in golden flames, his hair standing on end. Lee Haotian had never felt so full of energy before, as if he possessed boundless power within him. The temperature was so high that the air around the beam of light began to boil. Those are his hands. They're made of steel. Scott's laser eyes are indeed powerful. The temperature is enough to melt steel and penetrate rock. At this moment, Lee Haotian was confident that he could crush the Hulk with his strength. It seems that Lee Haotian has changed completely since his last genetic outburst. The professor looked at Lee Haotian's blonde hair and spoke. This is also a good time for Lee Haotian to gain control over his chi. Everyone could see that the air was about to burst into flames. The power of this laser beam at this moment is far beyond what Colossus could have achieved before. It used about 1/1000th of its power. My full power Cyclops attack is actually on par with his? Does that mean Lee Haotian will be able to surpass him in no time? Moreover, the professor felt that Lee Haotian's power seemed to extend beyond this. If the shockwave from those laser eyes and Lee Haotian were to explode, the training ground would probably be razed to the ground. The next moment, Lee Haotian rushed to Scott's side. Judging from this point of view, Lee Haotian's strengths should be close to that of Scott and others. If you are slightly better than others, you might arouse their jealousy. Lee Haotian had never been treated like this before, and he was immediately a little uncomfortable. Professor Lee Haotian is really something, Aurora said with some admiration. Did you see how fast he was just now? The professor said. These past few days, Lee Haotian has acted as if he's become a big star and an internet celebrity. I never imagined that mutants would have such a crazy fanatical idol-worshipping effect. I want to wait until my abilities are completely stable before making any decisions. The X-Men are always open to you. Just as Storm was about to leave, she suddenly couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Storm Girl's face lit up with joy, and she quickly got up and went over. Originally, the plan was to develop quietly, until he was at least able to transform into Super Saiyan 3. Jean will be resurrected, and then Cyclops and Professor X will both die. By then, he will definitely be at least at the Super Saiyan God level. Lee Haotian immediately smiled and shook his head. Even Phantom Cat and Colossus, who haven't graduated yet, are here. Clearly, what Logan just said was somewhat heavy for them. In fact, Logan wouldn't have returned to Xavier Academy to seek help if he had no other options. Scott, Aurora, and Logan, you three will lead the team. The professor glanced at the others, who hadn't been called on, and immediately spoke up. This is something Professor X absolutely does not want to see. Logan's mental strength has become unimaginably powerful. I've used the brainwave enhancer several times, but I still can't find the source of the danger. Just then Stormgirl Aurora suddenly spoke up. Lee Haotian guessed that Lee Haotian's strength had probably already surpassed his own. If something goes wrong at a critical moment, it could put the rescued children in danger. Otherwise, if a problem arises, it could put the entire team in grave danger. Even if the opponent is really strong. We didn't have much training back then. We just went straight into battle. I've been keeping an eye on him, Orolo said. Logan, standing beside him, was immediately shocked. Even Magneto back in the day was never praised by Professor X like this. Then he saw Storm, along with Logan and the others, walking towards him. After all, this mission is not very dangerous, and it can increase your practical experience. Don't worry, the professor has approved this operation. There will be no danger. After all, my presence could very well cause a butterfly effect. No, you won't, because you are a warrior Saiyan. This world not only has all sorts of strange mutant abilities that are no less than superpowers but also various gods brown with powerful divine strength. Clarice noticed that Li Haotian's expression was a bit strange, and immediately asked worriedly, how could they, as teachers at the college, do such a thing? After all, this operation was not particularly dangerous. If Li Haotian is truly worried about the danger and refuses this mission, if all else fails, I can just use teleportation to get back to Xavier Academy. The teachers said that this operation is not very dangerous. This statement actually means that as long as Clarice is still in school, he can use teleportation to return here from any dangerous place. Logan, who had been silent all along, shook his head and sighed. The main purpose of this operation is to rescue a child inside a mutant research facility. After all, Logan's previous infiltrations had all ended in failure. After all, given Li Haotian's strength, he was no match for the methods the research institute had demonstrated. Stormgirl Ororo said with a smile, if you feel good about participating in the X-Men operation after this mission, you can consider formally accepting our invitation to become a regular X-Men member. This made Scott truly acknowledge Li Haotian. Upon hearing this, Li Haotian was taken aback and became somewhat curious. In some friendly countries, the X-Men are equivalent to certain special departments. They usually hide among ordinary people and are difficult to detect. After all, every country has an airspace defense system. At the time, Li Haotian was a little curious, but now it seems that this was the effort made by Professor X. Before you knew it, night had fallen. This has aroused envy and longing among many students. Even Li Haotian couldn't help but sigh that there's some truth to the saying beauty is justice. Depending on the flight speed, it will take a maximum of 2 hours. We must draw all of the enemy's firepower here. Logan is the leader of the X-Men, so he is in charge of each mission. Katie smiled sweetly, her anticipation growing even stronger. Okay, I will protect her. Li Haotian nodded seriously. Upon hearing this, Li Haotian immediately nodded, indicating that he understood. This was the first time he had ever seen it. Not to mention that your strength far surpasses mine. Your mental fortitude is also beyond my reach. After all, the previous move was just a simple test and exchange of skills. In an instant, the alarm at the Mutant Research Institute went off. The Desert Eagle, automatic rifle, and submachine gun in his hands were all the latest models. It is protected by an absolute armed force. Before the Institute's guards could act, a fierce wind suddenly arose. Instantly, the man burst into flames and turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. It's so fine that it would cause injury if you rub it, and death if you touch it. By this time, Storm and the advanced team had already gained the upper hand. The firepower of this Mutant Research Institute is still quite fierce. Mutants have many different abilities, such as Iceman Bobby and Cyclops Scott. If you know the other person, you'll naturally know their abilities and have ways to counter them. Li Haotian was about to stab them both through the heart, but Li Haotian was faster. Even if Li Haotian hadn't made a move, Logan was absolutely confident that he could have easily killed those two people. Kitty the Phantom Cat patted her little chest and said in a somewhat shocked tone, now is not the time for jokes. More likely the other side will take the children hostage. All the armed men they encountered along the way were instantly dealt with by Logan and Li Haotian. Logan immediately looked at Li Haotian and Katie and spoke. The gate is made of a special alloy that cannot be damaged by ordinary automatic rifles or handheld submachine guns. At that moment, the Saiyan blood within him began to boil. In an instant, the previously dilapidated and chaotic corridor became much cleaner. This is a room, and it should be the place the little boy mentioned earlier, filled with blood and vengeful spirits. It was clearly a flame, yet it carried a hint of coldness. Before Li Haotian could continue forward, he saw a purple flame rise from the ground out of thin air. Just because you have strong combat power doesn't mean you're immune to everything. This is the application of Qi. Its power is not great, but it is very bright. Gao Liang's good looks were not what surprised Li Haotian. The deep purple eyeshadow gave her a slightly eerie look, and her long purplish-red hair cascaded over her shoulders. Even the surroundings began to blur, making it difficult to see clearly. Li Haotian dared not be careless, so he immediately raised his chi and unleashed a frenzied burst. The enemy is indiscriminate, regardless of gender or age. With a poof, the protective shield was instantly shattered. The fallen angel struggled frantically as soon as it was tied up. To pull her back from the brink of depravity, a slap was indispensable. In addition, her lips were a sexy dark purple. The owner of this research institute is a real bastard. Moreover, all the series he had watched had parts that were cut. At this moment, she had completely lost the terrifying aura of a mutant she had previously displayed. The fallen angel then took a closer look at the boy in front of him. The fallen angel said in a low voice, "There are many types of mutants, and some of them look no different from ordinary people. You are handsome and good-looking, but to me you look like an ugly monster. This way you can fly freely in the air." When the fallen angel heard Li Haotian say this, he was stunned, and disbelief filled his eyes. Li Haotian immediately spoke in a serious tone. This was the first time in her life she had ever blushed. The fallen angel, however, spoke with great resentment. Only then did they realize that there was a chain on the other person's foot. Even a chain as thick as a thigh can be easily broken. It can't be opened by any external force except with a key to the chain. An alloy made of adamantium and special materials. It's something that Li Haotian can't do right now. The fallen angel was stunned, not understanding what Li Haotian was talking about. Li Haotian was more handsome than any man she had ever seen before. It must be said that this destiny is definitely connected to something weighing over 100 tons. Li Haotian flew out of the building, dragging a solid metal block that was as tall as a 3-story building. "Alice, can you help me protect these lovely children?" Li Haotian smiled and touched Alice's face. Li Haotian's target is none other than Wolverine Logan. All the people outside the research institute have finally been completely cleared out. "We are the X-Men, not bad guys, we're here for the good." A passage, several meters in diameter, was carved out directly on the ground. Logan, the mighty Wolverine, was actually dragged out by the neck by one hand. Colossus, with his eyes as big as copper bells, found it quite amusing. Even Colossus was somewhat envious of Li Haotian's X-gene. Seeing that the person had been rescued, a storm girl immediately got up and flew towards the fighter jet. This treatment made Colossus so envious, he almost cried. This research institute actually used adamantium to lock up the mutant in front of them. Is this seemingly beautiful and delicate girl really that powerful? Upon seeing this, Li Haotian immediately smiled. Even Katie, a beautiful young woman, had to admit it. "Hopefully, I can find something interesting inside." Colossus and Katie were assigned to take these mutant adultery to the dormitory and settle them in. It seems that Alice hasn't had a single night of restful sleep in that dilapidated research institute. Those inhumane experiments truly made life worse than death. The research materials he obtained were all stored on a floppy disk. Half an hour later, he had browsed through all of these things. Li Haotian then opened the document containing the information about the experimental subjects' identities. Soon, Li Haotian found Alice's information in the test subject's identity information. Later, he was enlightened by the organization and began to conduct the mutant X gene NO2.33 experiment. Li Haotian's eyes flickered, as if he were deep in thought. In the Marvel Universe, there are many evil forces hidden underground. So, is the force behind this research institute Hydra or Hellfire? This world is indeed much more complicated than I imagined. In terms of absolute strength, Li Haotian is capable of transforming into a Super Saiyan. This means that he is capable of creating new systems. If there were a place battles could be simulated indefinitely, there would be suitable opponents asked to practice against. Li Haotian was suddenly inspired and began creating again. Even Li Haotian felt a little weak. This newly created super combat space system has two uses. Simply put, 5 minutes inside the combat space is equivalent to only 1 minute outside. This function can be used whether it is mental or physical entry. Furthermore, the power limit of the small world is 3 times that of Li Haotian's own strength. From this perspective, this combat space has a third function. It seems there has been a lot of progress these past few days. The systems used to have a space of only 100 cubic meters, but now it only has 30,000 cubic meters. I can still feel that I get stronger as long as I'm in the sun. The progress has reached 11.1%, and we may not be far from Super Saiyan 1 Stage 2. Looking at the sky, it was already morning. It seems that, although I don't have mental powers, my spirit, which is 137 times stronger than that of an ordinary person, still has some effect. So offering Alice some simple emotional comfort did have some effect. When faced with a problem, there's no problem that can't be solved with a single punch. Li Haotian ordered a hamburger and a cup of hot milk, and just found a corner to sit down. Li Haotian had never seen Li Haotian look so menacing. Upon hearing Katie's words, Li Haotian was immediately taken aback, thinking about the beautiful mutant who was rescued yesterday, who slept in Li Haotian's dormitory all night. This made her consider Clarice, a comrade in arms, for a moment. Li Haotian immediately changed the subject, looked at Clarice, who was looking down, and smiled, and said, just as Li Haotian was taking Clarice and Katie to class. Moreover, all the main members of the X-Men are here, including Professor X, who is sitting in the main seat. The 11 mutant children and 1 mutant girl in the Research Institute were successfully rescued from the laboratory. After all, Li Haotian's strength has been fully demonstrated. Not bad, Li. Your performance was much better than I expected. In this respect, Li Haotian was very much to Logan's liking. Especially now he has created the Super Combat Space System. We will only step in to protect mutants who use their abilities to commit crimes. When we go on a mission, we will also receive corresponding bonuses and allowances, based on the difficulty of the mission. Li Haotian came into this world penniless. There are allowances and subsidies for missions, and there's not much to do on ordinary days. Professor X was speechless for a moment. Even in a chaotic Marvel universe, money is still incredibly important. Professor X then went on to discuss some details about the 11 mutant children's life at Xavier's colleges. I came here mainly because I have something to give you. Logan immediately walked to the desk, picked up a large metal box from it, and brought it over. We have already checked it, and this chain is more than 90% made of adamantium. Moreover, once cooled, it would require temperatures exceeding 500,000 degrees Celsius to melt again. This thing is extremely hard, and it is very difficult for ordinary people to process it. Li Haotian knew that the adamantium chain was no ordinary chain, and should be worth some money. Li Haotian thought for a moment and then spoke. If they were made into weapons, there would be more ordinary weapons than you could use. Professor X was stunned upon hearing this. After reading it, Professor X nodded immediately, understanding. This adamantium chain could easily be forged into a massive two-handed sword. This is not entirely compatible with the opponent's strength. If combined with the indestructible adamantium dagger, it can achieve a one-hit kill, which will greatly enhance her strength. Such a precious item is priceless and unavailable for purchase. After all, the two of them were only teenagers, which gave Li Haotian a sense of nurturing. Previously, he thought Li Haotian was the kind of person who loved money very much. Li Haotian could feel that the transformation of his body began at the cellular level. It can better adapt to any environment, even in space. Clarice immediately smiled and took out a dagger that gleamed with metallic luster from her bosom. I heard that the price per gram is more than 20 times that of gold. Li Haotian was speechless for a moment. Even after she came to Xavier Academy, no one had ever been this kind to her. This made Clarice sincerely grateful to Li Haotian. Li Haotian patted the other person on the shoulder and said with a smile. Li Haotian felt a wave of helplessness. Li Haotian immediately touched his face, shook his head and smiled. Li Haotian immediately lay down again, took out a book, and covered his face with it, so Li Haotian didn't even need to look to guess who the person was. I really like the chain you gave me. It can be combined with my abilities, Alice said calmly, but her tone was firm. In any case, with Li Haotian's strength, he could sense familiar energy even throughout the entire world. Li Haotian was stunned for a moment. The multiple beauties with exotic styles are not only pleasing to the eye, but also exciting and addictive. In just 3 days, the weapon I mentioned has been forged. As he thought about it, Li Haotian began to feel sleepy. Right now, all he wants is to become stronger. To hell with this bullshit love story. When I read novels before, I felt that the authors made the protagonists so handsome, but I couldn't relate to them at all. Li Haotian came to borrow a book from the other party, and that was all. My throat suddenly felt a little dry, and I suddenly wanted a beer. Upon hearing Alice's question, Li Haotian was immediately stunned. It was a slightly curved, upward-pointing, purplish-red unicorn. If Li despises Then I will leave Xavier Academy, find a secluded mountain, and never come out again. This time it was Alice's turn, looking at Lee Haotian with a completely bewildered expression. This wasn't just Kizaru trying to comfort Alice. It was his true feeling. Instead, I felt a strange kind of beauty in it. Seeing this, Lee Haotian immediately spoke seriously. Half an hour later, Lee Haotian returned to the dormitory building in a daze. I forgot. I was originally going to find Katie. I made pizza. Try it and see if it's good. Clarice asked Lee Haotian why he was so good to her. It's somewhat similar to the Tsukuyomi space, where time, space, and quality are all under control. In an instant, the seemingly dull-witted second generation, Lee Haotian, rushed forward. With the same force, the other person was unharmed, but he was directly blown away. In an instant, his spirit dissipated, and his consciousness returned to reality. Is this what they call a huge gap in experience? Lee Haotian, the second generation, was ruthless and taciturn. In critical moments, Lee Haotian II will also use shockwave attacks. In reality, Lee Haotian was covered in sweat and panting heavily, until his mental energy was completely exhausted and he could no longer enter the battle space. Only through real life or death battles can one make crazy progress. Lee Haotian's heightened awareness of pure combat led to greater control over his power and an increase in his overall strength. After taking a shower, Lee Haotian called Alice from next door to have breakfast together. It turned out that there would be no classes today, but instead a trip to the city to make purchases. Clarice asked softly, a slight blush on her face. Combined with the features of a Western woman, it also has a certain charm. Lee Haotian will never encounter such good fortune. Seat. They are mostly people who look very similar to humans. There aren't many mutants with non-human appearances. If you want some cake, you can come with me. The car became noisy for a moment. No one is allowed to be late. Of course, you can also travel with me. Or with Logan's team. P.S. This book is an absolute must-read. No Mary Sue stories. And it's a story of ruthless decisiveness and invincibility. Professor X looked at Cyclops Scott, who rushed in and couldn't help but speak. No one could survive under that much pressure. Not even Chin. These days, he could feel that the zither was truly calling to him. After all, he knew that the X-Men were already short-handed, and the situation was very dangerous. Only X was called out, and given 200 pretty coins as shopping credit. Clarice was stunned for a moment and couldn't help but exclaim, in surprise. Lee Haotian immediately raised his hand and ruffled Clarice's hair. It gave Lee Haotian the feeling of a gentle head pat. Clarice immediately took a deep breath and nodded heavily. Upon hearing Lee Haotian's words, Katie excitedly rushed inside. It's already a chaotic crossover anime world. And on top of that, he's someone who's already dead and has transmigrated here. The other person was wearing an elegant burgundy dress, adorned with a few rubies. Of course, it won't be 1 times 1, but rather it will directly change from 2 ones to 11. Clarice immediately lowered her head and asked shyly. At that moment, Alice also came out from inside. Katie, who was the last to come out, was a little embarrassed. When Katie heard Clarice say that, she immediately looked up and asked, somewhat disbelievingly. Stormgirl Aurora left at this moment and came up to speak to a few girls. This is so that they are in their peak fighting condition most of the time. So the group bought some food and headed back to the agreed-upon location. Almost everyone was carrying large and small bags. The female classmates, on the other hand, were so envious, their eyes were practically red. Alice immediately turned to the male students around her, whose eyes were shining with excitement, and said coolly, is it because he has lived too long and is a bit out of touch with the times? Lee Haotian must be able to fight to a draw against Lee Haotian's second generation, who is twice as strong today. Previously, he was able to withstand 100 moves before being killed. After leaving the super combat space, Lee Haotian was panting heavily. Lee Haotian was very satisfied with the results of his cultivation this time. While the super combat space is convenient, it consumes an exceptionally large amount of mental energy. The sky was clear, and the air was crisp, with not a cloud in sight. Given Cyclops Scott's personality, how could he possibly leave the X-Men to go on vacation when things are so tense at Xavier's college? Next up should be Scott, who will be devoured by the resurrected Jean Grey, or rather, Phoenix. Just like in Dragon Ball, many villains could easily destroy the Earth, but in the end they lost to Kakarot on Earth. Should I go and save that bastard Scott? Just then, Katie walked over, a hint of excitement on her face. Lee Haotian hadn't expected that Katie would think of this. Li Haotian smiled and ruffled Clarissa's hair. A determined glint flashed in Clarissa's eyes as she turned and walked toward the training field. You must already know that Scott left the school. Where did Scott go? Aurora asked immediately. Li Haotian is also responsible for managing the entire academy, but her life is not as leisurely as one might imagine. After all, the professor had his own things to do. Storm Girl immediately spoke in a deep voice. When the others heard Storm say this, their faces also turned serious. The professor will only tell them the truth after they graduate from the academy or successfully join the X-Men. From this perspective, Professor X's ideology is somewhat similar to the will of fire. I don't think she would die so easily. Cyclops can be said to be a great victim of injustice. He really died for nothing. Fans had some understanding of Chin's abilities. Li Haotian realized that Chin might really still be alive. Professor X was well aware of this. After Li Haotian's earlier statement, although the others did not know, like Professor X, that John had another powerful, sealed personality. We are now only about 300 kilometers away from Lake Yakali. This made Scott, who was already in a state of confusion, even more confused. Li Haotian instinctively walked towards the interior of Lake Yakali. As the swirling eddy grew larger, it seemed as if a terrifying behemoth was gradually awakening in the lake. In an instant, it seemed as if the whole earth was shaking. Gradually, the figure slowly flew towards him and arrived in front of him. Scott just wanted to give Piano a big hug. The energy of the laser world he saw was directly channeled into Chin's mouth. When Storm Girl Aurora saw this, her face showed a look of horror. Is this the power of the Zither? Moreover, this is only the initial release of the Phoenix power within the Zither. Theoretically speaking, ordinary Earthlings can also increase the strength of their chi, and thus their combat power, through cultivation. With such mental power, he instantly felt that his ice might not even be able to touch the other person before it dissipated. Even if this mental power is incredibly strong, right now, if he had been any later, he would have been drained dry. Besides me, no one else here can save Scott in time. I might not make it in time, but at least I won't fall to my death. Storm Girl immediately said. Logan saw Storm looking at him and said helplessly. Seeing everyone's expressions, Li Haotian immediately smiled and shook his head. After all, Storm Girl can't really be considered a flying character. Li Haotian used this wind to propel himself away instantly. Li Haotian is indeed too strong, and his abilities are very well balanced. Li Haotian was very fast, and in the blink of an eye, he reached supersonic speed. For a moment, it felt as if we were swimming in the ocean, even though we were flying in the air. Chin, are you really going to kill the person most important to you? If this continues, Scott will be drained dry. Li Haotian suddenly raised his fist and launched a heavy attack. P.S. The plot is about to get going, and one exciting wave after another is coming. Li Haotian pulled Scott away from Chin's mouth, which immediately made Chin roar. I suddenly feel like I should create a Beerus Legacy template. After all, Goku is the protagonist of Dragon Ball, and Li Haotian obtained his inheritance template. As long as you have the power of rules, you can create new templates again. They learned more about him and guessed the limits of his power. Li Haotian could easily resolve the situation with a single divine turtle shockwave. After this attack, Chin, whose body had no energy replenishment, was immediately at a disadvantage and became extremely weak. In the previous battle, Li Haotian had been holding back and had not truly killed anyone. Feeling the power that Phoenix Girl was unleashing, Li Haotian's eyes flickered. This is why, despite being a Super Saiyan, he didn't possess the power to suppress everything or crush the entire universe. I still have plenty of time to become stronger, Senior Chin. Now we shall determine who is superior and who will live or die. This call suddenly made the Phoenix Girl opposite Li Haotian tremble, and a strange look of confusion flashed in her cold eyes. Li Haotian's expression immediately turned serious, and a golden wave of energy burst forth instantly. Wolverine Logan was thrilled to see this. When Li Haotian saw Wolverine Logan like this, he couldn't help but curl his lip. They had witnessed the battle from their fighter jets. It was incredibly intense. Li Haotian was starving and just wanted to eat something quickly to replenish his energy. From this perspective, people must eat 3 meals a day. Seeing Aurora's worried expression, Professor X spoke gently. This will cause Professor X immense heartache. When Storm asked about Jean Grey, everyone else held their breath and looked at Professor X. They simply couldn't imagine that the strong-willed and loving Jin was willing to sacrifice herself to save them. Seeing that everyone was staring at him, Professor Sex shook his head, sighed softly, and continued speaking. Simply put, her body is indeed a zither, but, at this moment her consciousness is not the zither, but rather, the instincts deep within her consciousness. This left Storm somewhat puzzled, even incredulous. In fact, Chin had a second personality a long time ago. If the piano were to go out of control again, there is a high possibility that someone would be injured or even killed. Rather, it's because the power of the phoenix is possessing Chin's body. Moreover, this time, it wasn't Jean who wanted to kill Scott. Professor X spoke first, and everyone nodded in agreement. Lee, I heard that you unleashed tremendous power when you fought Chin. Professor X even suspected that Lee Haotian's current strength had surpassed his own. Even within the entire academy, there are quite a few people like this. Could there be some hidden information about the X gene? Professor, are you referring to the secondary awakening of the X gene? Lee Haotian's original ability was simply to cease light. It can even control these high-temperature rays and turn them into an energy shield. Professor X looked at Lee Haotian with a hint of seriousness in his eyes as he spoke. Unfortunately, it turned to ashes in broad daylight. Over the years, that matter has remained in my heart, so I have never given up on researching the X gene. Li Haotan is the key to unleashing the power within, but at the same time, he is also a lock to protect the lives of mutants. The reason that mutant turned to ashes in broad daylight was because his life force was completely burned away. Li Haotian didn't know why Li Haotian had become so powerful. Even these abilities were provided by the system. Instead, it is a terrifying world filled with various single universes, multiverses, parallel universes, and even super universes and omnipotent universes. From this point of view, Professor X suddenly felt that Storm Aurora had good taste. I think we should add some more things to the attribute panel. You can search for my god-level choice in the One Piece world, or find the book on the author's page. A moment later, all the power of the rules that Li Haotian had just accumulated was completely consumed. This origin is the power of Li Haotian's rules. In his super battle space, he had just defeated Li Haotian II, who was twice his size. All I'll get is a good beating from myself. I'm not so easily defeated by you now. With a single strike, the two were evenly matched. As he unleashed this move, he delivered a powerful punch to his opponent's head. This shows that Li Haotian and Li Haotian II are roughly equal in strength. The two were actually quite evenly matched. But during the battle, Li Haotian learned a new move. So the opponent will also possess the lightsaber technique that he has just mastered. Moreover, it's a version of yourself that can grow and improve alongside you, and may even be 3 times stronger than you. They found Alice standing at the dormitory. Li Haotian thought for a moment, then spoke up. Li Haotian even felt that Li Haotian was deliberately avoiding her. After all, they had searched all over Xavier Academy, but couldn't find him, and the other party had even been to the training ground. The grounds. The two soon returned to Li Haotian's dormitory. What you're about to see is my biggest secret. I can fight freely here, and even choose my opponent. Here, even when she wanted to use her abilities, there was an inexplicable force suppressing them. I usually come here to fight when I have nothing else to do. If not strong enough, you can tell me, and I can wait for you, but please don't let me lose sight of you. There was no other way. In his saintly mode, his single-minded focus made him more suited for combat. Li Haotian truly became Professor X's most prized student. Even their wheelchairs were almost identical. For the past 5 days, Li Haotian has been diligently cultivating in the combat space. The sun was extremely strong for the past 5 days, which accelerated Li Haotian's growth rate. Then we can create a new inheritance template. Li Haotian took Clarice and Alice to the library's open-air balcony to sunbathe. So when Storm came to find him, Li Haotian was immediately curious. Storm Girl Aurora immediately smiled and said. Li Haotian nodded and did not refuse. Hopefully, after obtaining other inheritance templates, can suppress the Saiyan's love of fighting. Clarice, Alice, this is a coordinated X-Men battle. At that moment, the two of them spoke in unison. My skills have improved rapidly recently, and I have been training hard. This led Aurora to ultimately compromise, shaking his head helplessly. A moment later, Storm Girl Aurora returned. This place is much better than the previous Ika's training ground. Li Haotian turned his head and saw Kitty Phantom Cat, Colossus, Poppy the Iceman, Anna the Rakshasa, and Logan the Wolverine. Alice is one thing, she's only a little younger than Katie, and she's quite strong. The crowd immediately began to discuss the matter. They are mainly robots, But these robots also possess mutant abilities. How could a robot possibly have mutant abilities? As expected, the rules changed after the space was distorted just now. They were even equipped with rocket launchers. Colossus, on the other hand, simply used his body to withstand the attack. They were repelled by the force of the attack. In reality, Alice's strength should be on the same level as Storm Aurora. Even within the X-Men universe, his strength would be considered above average. When Iceman Bobby and the others saw the robot, they couldn't help but tease it. Lee Haotian thought that Professor X at this time should not have known about Project Sentinel. Upon seeing the Sentinel appear, Storm immediately spoke. In the blink of an eye, a terrifying aura of ice began to permeate the surroundings. In the distance, a portal opened in the void. Otherwise, an attack speed exceeding 3 times this. The speed of sound would be enough to pierce through steel plates tens of millimeters in diameter. Everyone was stunned when these words were spoken. Poppy, who was initially shocked, completely forgot how terrifying the machine gun was. Unless he uses his chi to protect his body, he can be harmed by machine gun fire. The claws, forged from adamantium, are indestructible and incredibly sharp. Lee Haotian then used the same ice hammer he had previously used against Colossus. Poppy the Iceman immediately became smug again. Just then, the group discovered the skin of these sentries. The attacks from Poppy and Storm earlier clearly had no effect. They will definitely face off against the real Sentinels in the future. Seeing that Colossus's power was ineffective, the Sentinel began using Iceman Poppy's power instead. Otherwise, if it were a Sentinel, it could absorb and imitate even the energy of Chi. Unexpectedly, Lee Haotian was the first to kill the sentry. It seems that having Lee Haotian participate in this joint simulation was indeed the right decision. Lee Haotian's combat awareness is a bit lacking, far inferior to Lee Haotian II. It was actually broken by Lee Haotian with his bare hands. How come he can break a robot with his bare hands, but you got knocked away? The two were made of the same material, but the other was much larger and definitely no weaker than him. Lee Haotian was also confident that he could break the other person's arm. With his current strength, he can't compete with Cyclops' laser beam. Lee Haotian immediately raised his hand and unleashed a miniature divine turtle shockwave. The sentry was attacked. The laser beam immediately dissipated, and he whirled around. The 5 sentries were quickly wiped out. The group then left the training room in the underground base and returned to their respective dormitories. Before they had even finished their meal, Bobby, Katie, and the others had already sat down. After all, the professor is a recognized strongman in the mutant world. Lee Haotian's actual combat strength is actually very weak. There are many ways to resist the professor's control. Or what if one day you have a second awakening of the X gene? Then you'll be even more powerful. At this moment, Anna, the Rakshasa woman beside her, spoke up with some distress. No, when we encounter enemies we can't defeat in the future, we'll have to see how you can save us. In normal times, it doesn't have much effect. This is our company's latest research product, which can permanently suppress mutant genes. Worthington, can your company's drugs really turn mutants back into normal people? This place was once the most infamous prison in the world. Alcatraz, Kitty the Phantom Cat said in surprise. Just then Stormgirl Aurora also walked over. Logan the Wolverine looked at the blue-haired man and said with some displeasure, "All right, Hank, what brings you here?" Professor X noticed the atmosphere was getting a bit awkward and immediately changed the subject. Could it be news about Eric? Professor X's face lit up with joy. The others have already read the previous sections, so they already know some of it. Anna the Rakshasa woman immediately stood up and looked at Hank with some excitement, asking him a question. "I think this is very likely government-led," Logan said, a hint of doubt flashing in his eyes. Logan was completely bewildered and looked at Professor X. It seems that this is indeed true. If the other party wanted to be an ordinary person, he could go and find a mutant cure for Alice. "Do you like how I am now?" Alice didn't answer but instead asked Lee Haotian. Poppy, the Iceman sitting opposite Lee Haotian, asked with some confusion. Lee Haotian smiled slightly at the two of them, then stood up. Hank, however, looked at Lee Haotian with some suspicion, as he had never seen Lee Haotian before. How could someone say something like that? Isn't this the superpower that people dream of in those science fiction movies we used to watch? Those ordinary people are not afraid of us or discriminate against us. Don't dream. They just can't have them. Are ordinary people really afraid or discriminate against mutants? If everyone could awaken the X gene and possess mutant abilities. If the data isn't good, there won't be any more recommendations, and a free book without recommendations is completely ruined. When Hank saw Lee Haotian say this, and Professor X did not stop him, he understood. In his view, the X gene is a good thing. Clarice was lying on Lee Haotian's left, and Alice was on his right. As the afternoon sun gradually weakened, Lee Haotian prepared to get up and return to his dormitory to cultivate in the combat space. When Lee Haotian and Clarice arrived, there were already dozens of people sitting in the office. Lee Haotian's main role is to guide and cultivate the values and understanding of mutant students. Professor X smiled and nodded when he saw Lee Haotian and the others walk in. Regardless of your abilities, whether strong or weak, you must be above ordinary people. At this moment, a student suddenly asked with a puzzled look on his face. Only mutants who are bound by morality will not be consumed by desire and become slaves to power. Just then Poppy, the Iceman standing next to him, suddenly asked out of curiosity. As I have said before, morality originates from social consciousness, and it changes with the times. This is why ordinary people fear and are afraid of us. It is precisely because we mutants can easily rise above the framework that ordinary people fear us. Only complete agreement can eliminate fear between people and reduce jealousy caused by powers experities. A powerful mutant can also crush a weak mutant. Just like society today, although they are all ordinary people, the gap between the rich and the poor is huge. While Professor X and the others were still pondering Lee Haotian's question, pedestrians rarely dare to walk outside, and when they do, they are always in a hurry. I'm sure everyone has seen the press conference and knows about the antidote. We must organize ourselves into a powerful group. Those weak humans are our common enemy. Their goal is not to accept us, but to exterminate us. This person has some gray hair and is quite old, but he has a very strong presence. He could tell that this group of people had come here to seize control of the power here. It could be today, or it could be tomorrow. When a group of armed men storm into your hideout, Fireman immediately gave him the middle finger in disdain. From now on, humans will fear us and avoid us, instead of us living in fear like rats, hiding in underground water channels. The red cape moved without wind, exuding an unparalleled aura of power. If Magneto had been present when Lee Haotian asked Professor X the same question that morning, there are only two ways to do this. Magneto, then, is a hawk who will stop at nothing to achieve his goals. After all, Magneto's exploits have been circulating among mutants for decades. Lee Haotian is also a hero and idol in the hearts of many mutants. Rather, they are mutants who can actually play a role. Some students were very anxious, some were terrified, some wanted to try it, and some were extremely angry. There is a high probability that he was captured and used as a guinea pig for research. They should enjoy the same rights and treatment as ordinary people. When it comes to mutant research, Alice is the one who hates it the most. It's likely that Alice's soul has long since fallen into endless pain and darkness, lost in chaos and slaughter. Lee Haotian turned his head to look with some curiosity. An old woman who is all alone and helpless, who has never been loved or enjoyed love in her life. Seeing Bobby's angry and confused expression, Lee Haotian was speechless. This is a small feature that Lee Haotian set up, so that he wouldn't even realize the power of the rules had reached its limit. Finally reached 20%, can start a new template again. Without the slightest hesitation, Lee Haotian immediately began creating the template character. Now a sub-panel has been added to the attribute panel. Clarice, who was standing next to her, asked with some confusion. Alice's expression immediately turned cold, so Lee Haotian quickly added a comment as well. I seem to have awakened a new ability. Strength surpasses Colossus, energy attacks outperform Cyclops, flight speed exceeds Storms, and combat skills are inferior to Wolverine's. Lee Haotian was a ruthless man who didn't talk much. He simply slashed at the target with a dagger. Clarice was shocked to see Lee Haotian cut herself with a dagger. Clarice was so shocked by what she saw that she was speechless. There was no blood flowing from his wound just now. It's just that Alice is less good at expressing herself than Clarice. Clarice was genuinely happy for Lee Haotian. Clarice was even happier about this than the increased ability to save her own life. It's just that the body has changed shape and is returning to its original form. Excessive use of supercell regeneration will weaken Boo's recovery and regeneration abilities. The best among them is Wolverine Logan, but this is not unique to Wolverine. In the blink of an eye, the sideburn that Lee Haotian had cut off miraculously regenerated. I initially thought that the other party had only awakened some simple, minor abilities. Even if Li Haotian told her that there were other abilities, each one of them is extremely precious. Then, the hand holding the dagger suddenly released its grip. Could it be a god descending to earth? So at this moment, Alice, who already cared a lot about Li Haotian, was. Clarice and Alice were so stunned that they didn't know what to say. The students of Xavier College were taken aback by this sudden turn of events. Kitty the Phantom Cat pouted as she spoke. Li Haotian's flying speed was simply astonishing. Li Haotian was worried that Li Haotian hadn't taken what he said to heart last time. What a promising talent it would be if he were to die from a sudden surge in strength. Moreover, her speed was astonishing, far exceeding 10 times, or even dozens of times, her flight speed. There are also magnificent ancient ruins left by the Ottoman, Byzantine and Roman empires, as well as Popokal and fairy chimneys, which are natural wonders. There are warm and hospitable people, a splendid culture, enchanting scenery, and mysterious legends. So the first thing that comes to mind is the land of romance. The vast, starry sky is a deep blue, shimmering with a captivating profundity. So this is what it feels like to fly at full speed. This deep universe is full of mystery, and also has a touch of fairy tale color. Li Haotian just wanted to test Majin Buu's abilities. Li Haotian immediately smiled and said it. What woman could resist such an atmosphere? Or perhaps on that day, it wasn't Li Haotian who entered her room, but someone else. Then the X-Men would certainly not let him go, which would be another possible outcome. Doesn't this prove that he is a trustworthy person? In reality, Li Haotian was, after all, a time traveler. Even if you don't go looking for trouble, trouble will find you. I just wanted to shoot a basket. The persons used their mental power to clear away the building ruins instantly. Scott, her two rushed out of the teaching building in a wheelchair. Couldn't help but roar. Suddenly, the crowd became even more frightened, and doubts filled their minds. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief and felt relieved. So when Chin suddenly erupted this time, everyone became a little worried. Professor, should we go find the piano and bring it back? Bobby nodded and turned to leave but stopped halfway there. In fact, with his abilities, he could easily invade the minds of Clarice or Alice. Just as Li Haotian approached Xavier College, he discovered that a building had collapsed and turned into ruins. After all, Xavier's College now has Professor X, as well as Wolverine, Colossus, Poppy the Iceman, and others. Li Haotian was taken aback when he heard Bobby's words, and sighed softly in his heart. Unexpectedly, Jean still erupted and left Xavier Academy. They quickly arrived at the professor's side, where almost all the X-Men were present. Professor X should have been observing Jean these past few days. So how could she have suddenly erupted like this? If that power were to erupt, the consequences would not only be the destruction of ordinary people, but also of mutants, and even the world itself. Moreover, Professor X has already discovered the Phoenix Force within Jean. At this point, Wolverine's expression turned serious as he earnestly said to Professor X, "No one wants to be controlled. Whether they are mutants or ordinary people, no one likes to be controlled. The main problem is that, over time, under the guise of doing what's best for you, people are controlling their children's words and actions." Recalling the way the other person had looked at him earlier, and the strange light in their eyes. Now, Professor X looked at Li Haotian and spoke. The essence is his explanation of the power of rules in the attribute bar he created. Instead, one can obtain a large amount of rule power simply by accepting other people's requests or completing tasks. What could have made Li Haotian so happy? Li Haotian had naturally noticed the change in his opponent, but X didn't say much during the fight. With Professor X's power, he would naturally be able to sense it. Inside the truck, the President of the United States was roaring loudly. The chubby, dark-skinned policeman turned around with a helpless expression. "Once I get out of here, I will definitely kill you with my own hands." It crashed instantly into the front of the cell, where it had been standing. Inside the cell, a blue-skinned mutant spoke to the fat, dark corpse, with a disdainful look on his face. At that moment the iron door of the truck was opened from the outside. "If you weren't here, they wouldn't have anything to play with. You really are the woman I need most." Fireman immediately looked at the first name and gave a brief introduction. Then 7 people came out of there. Magneto nodded to Maduro, then continued walking toward the next cell. Li Haotian immediately raised his hand, and cell number 88,393 was opened directly. The insates in cell number 88,393 393 are extremely dangerous. Magneto looked at Koimarco in front of him and asked a question. In fact, as Magneto's bodyguard, this was something he should have done. Mystique felt a chill run down her spine as she looked into Magneto's eyes. Upon hearing this, the fireman standing nearby felt a jolt in his heart. What a pity. She was extremely beautiful. Boss, I've found the source of that terrifying magnetic field fluctuation earlier. Such immense power, can it be sealed away so easily? If you bring them back and can't control them, then they're no longer companions. Professor X took her away from there. Li Haotian sat next to Professor X and, seeing that the other was very quiet, couldn't help but ask out of curiosity. It is the creator and source of the spirit and mind, of all things that exist or will exist, in the future, in the infinite multiverse. Even if I can't win, I have to go, because it's my duty. In fact, back in 1998, I and some of the strongest people among humanity made a confidentiality agreement that we had to uphold. If either side crosses the line, the agreement will be void, and the two sides will engage in a fight to the death. Mutants are simply individuals whose X gene has awakened, thus granting them special superpowers. The battle during that confidentiality agreement in 1998 was extremely fierce. Of the mutants who survived, only he and Magneto remained. Unexpectedly, there was such a secret that they were unaware of. It can even change the past and the future. Even Li Haotian, who possesses the Super Saiyan transformation, is not certain that he can defeat Jean's Fix Force. In this respect, it is inferior to the power of mental energy. I'm afraid there won't be any humans left on Earth. At worst, it would cause drastic changes to the entire Earth's ecological environment, making it unsuitable for human habitation. After all, in her view, mutants are the most powerful. There are people beyond people, heavens beyond heavens, and universes beyond universes. Moreover, this world has far more humans as intelligent life. Even if you come, you can't stop Chin, so what's the point? Even if the plot of Reverse the Future had not occurred, the Sentinels would have slaughtered all of humanity in the future, if he dies before these dangers are resolved. Moreover, Jean's power is, in some ways, even greater than Professor X's. In addition, there were the things Professor X said when he left the college. It seems Professor X is not as simple as he appears. Even if I can't defeat Jean Grey's Phoenix Force, she can't kill me. It must be some kind of superpower related to the mind. If Li Haotian were to use his telekinetic abilities now, he shouldn't be much weaker than Shin. Professor X gave Li Haotian a look. If it were 20 or 30 years earlier, the situation of mutants would definitely not be like this now. If such a person had appeared earlier, he would definitely have been the best and perfect successor. After all, he saw no ambition whatsoever in Li Haotian's eyes. Fat Majin Buu also became kind after absorbing the Grand Supreme Kai. This made Li Haotian think of Orochimaru. Soul or consciousness, which one is the core? If you use your consciousness, can you really be reborn? Li Haotian is really too smart, he even guessed this. Or perhaps, he was reborn from his original body using his consciousness. Since Li Haotian already knew the truth, Professor X had no intention of hiding it any longer. Then with red eyes, she said I love you, and the piano died from the pain. After all, he had already proven that the gears of fate move forward according to their course. With the power of the harp, perhaps she wouldn't have died on Saturn. Just then, a sound suddenly came from the side. Storm immediately became alert, while Logan looked embarrassed. It's just about fire control. The Iceman is far superior to you. Professor X gave Li Haotian a deep look as he finished speaking. Could you take care of Ororo and the others for me? This is a person quite different from the Charles on screen. If the opponent possesses a method for cultivating chi, I believe they will be able to quickly increase their combat power. If he were to unleash his full power, he would be no less capable than Li Haotian is now. There were also some unrecognizable figures, mostly low-level thugs. What I look at is none of your business, you pervert. Kid, I'm going to turn you into mincemeat, and no one can save you. It's just too low level. It has no presence at all. The opponent's mutant level is actually higher than Magneto's. Now is the best practical time to kill the other side. Li Haotian immediately revealed a cold smile. Anyone who comes into contact with the gem will gain magical powers and become a juggernaut. At this point, nothing can stop it anymore. Even tanks and armored vehicles will be smashed to pieces. Everyone was stunned and looked at the house. Storm's expression changed drastically, and she turned around and rushed into the house. The next moment, the sounds of intense fighting came from inside the house. Wolverine immediately raised his hand, and suddenly his hand shot out an adamantium claw. Logan cursed under his breath and led the hedgehog-like man inside. "You are free and no one can control you." With her at the center, everything began to gradually disintegrate. Professor X, however, gave a gentle smile. At that moment, a loud bang suddenly came from outside. Especially when you give the opponent time to build up their momentum and get a running start, the force of their impact is truly formidable. Even Wolverine would fall apart if he were hit hard. In addition, given the opponent's superhuman healing ability, it would be very difficult for them to die. Upon seeing this, the red tank was stunned, its eyes filled with disbelief. These are mutants who can regenerate even after being smashed to pieces. Even under normal circumstances, he is stronger than him. The red tank roared and immediately turned and ran away. This time, the pit is tens of meters high, tens of meters long, and more than 10 meters deep. The red tank was stunned when it saw this. When Li Haotian saw the bewildered look on the red tank's face, a smile immediately appeared on his lips. The red tank was immediately stunned by the impact. This red tank really is a meat shield. This demonstrates that the red tank's defensive capabilities are truly formidable. Li Haotian couldn't believe the other party was that strong. The Saiyan's warlike and belligerent blood was ignited at this moment. This is a technique for completely releasing energy. Li Haotian didn't believe the other party could really be that powerful. Despite being invincible, he was struck by his opponent and had all the bones in his body shattered. Less than a third of its body remained, and even its head was only the size of a fist. In that situation, not to mention ordinary firearms, even rocket launchers and missiles could not harm it in the slightest. Seeing this, the red tank on the ground, which had been convulsing, rolled its eyes and fainted. Seeing this, Li Haotian became somewhat curious. Li Haotian probably has no choice but to confront the red tank head-on. Stamina, defense and other attributes will all be greatly improved. Even so, he was still able to fight Li Haotian to this extent. So, to destroy mutants whose strength is below the single universe level, and only between the Earth and Skyfather levels, one would need to. Nothing can violate the rules of this universe. They have completely disappeared from this world. Magneto will then take Jean Grey away to complete his next plan. Magneto approached the other woman, looked at the dazed Jean, and spoke. It was caused by the fight between Juggernaut and that young man next to Professor X. At that moment, the power that the two of them unleashed was immense. Li Haotian already had a good understanding of the red tank's capabilities. Instead, it was a truly terrifying battles, where the opponent was allowed to do whatever they wanted. Having said that, the Nightwalker fell silent. Otherwise, if Qin were to be further agitated, it wouldn't be so easy to take her away. Li Haotian immediately dodged and rushed towards Qin's house. Storm tried to speak, but couldn't utter a single word. She just stared intently at the wheelchair. So was this matter right or wrong? Could you please give me some free encouragement and gifts? Jean not only killed the professor, but also directly disintegrated him into molecules. The three of them walked out of the dilapidated villa in the blink of an eye. Aurora and Logan were immediately shocked, their eyes filled with horror. In fact, he had the opportunity to save Professor X. Li Haotian was stunned when he heard Storm say that. The surrounding area was a mess. There was hardly any intact space left. Li Haotian smiled and pointed in the direction behind them. Then he turned the wheelchair into a lump of clay and put it in his pocket. Logan was a little annoyed by the posture. It can turn people or objects into little gadgets. Your mutant ability is no small matter. In principle, it is permissible for people who are weaker than me to do this. The main reason is that Li Haotian has no interest in absorbing people. The disintegration power that Qin used before was already terrifying. It could leave no trace of a person's body. They turned the entire universe into something delicious and fun. Perhaps Li Haotian, an upright and kind person, has not yet realized how terrifying this ability is. It can only be a minor auxiliary ability. Li Haotian is now capable of transforming into Super Saiyan 1, second form. Reaching the level of a celestial father would be enough to destroy the Earth. How can I bring this up with Scott? So Storm doesn't know if Scott is able to withstand this heavy blow. Suppressing her grief, she began to recount what had happened. Jean Grey has no right to be called a senior by us. She's a murderer. In the depths of some people's hearts, a seed called hatred began to sprout. Perhaps the zither should never be truly let go. It should always be firmly controlled. When have I ever lied to you? Storm wanted to offer some words of comfort, but didn't know what to say. I know everyone is feeling grief and anger, but we must still pull ourselves together. Otherwise, Xavier College would be completely destroyed. There were firefighters, medical personnel, and beautiful police officers. Sure enough, some people were hiding in a cellar some distance from Chin's villa. This person is Nick Fury, the head of SHIELD, a special agency of the United States. At this moment, the person on the instrument was none other than Lee Haotian. It's Professor X, Charles, a student he took in a few months ago. Finally, a few months ago, the X gene suddenly awakened, giving birth to mutant abilities. Nick gazed at Lee Haotian's image on the instrument and asked after a moment of silence. Just then, a person carrying the same equipment walked over. Fitz immediately handed the tablet-like device in his hand to everyone, and Nick took it. He was released from the mobile prison a few days ago. They were well aware of the Red Tank's power. Even a powerful mutant like Magneto could only use his powers to kill Juggernaut before he could act. Perhaps only the Hulk could hold his own. His sheer physical strength, able to withstand the red-haired fox when he was on the run. However, he'll go back and have May find a way to sneak into Xavier Academy and make contact with this black-haired boy. Laser Eyes also seems to have suffered a serious injury a few days ago and has not yet recovered. So we're standing still for now. But you can start negotiating with Trask Industries. If Charles were still alive, the confidentiality agreement would naturally remain in effect. After all, in a sense, the X-Men are on the same side as SHIELD. The professor's funeral was held in a solemn manner. Scott went on to become the new principal. After all, Scott is qualified to be the principal. A week has passed in the blink of an eye, and nothing major has happened at the college. There is still so much potential that can be developed. Finally, I can try to see if I can exploit the bug in the X gene. So, is it possible to directly manifest the power of rules externally? If this experiment is successful, then Lee Haotian will be able to achieve great things in the future. It was already very familiar with the creation system. Sometimes, even if you can't achieve the most ideal state, you can still achieve a similar effect through another method. It was just a possibility he speculated about, but he never expected it. Lee Haotian picked up a toothpick, ate a small piece of apple, and said with a smile, "It's so different from when she was locked up in the mutant research facility." This was something she could only dream of before. For her, simply being by Lee Haotian's side was her greatest wish. These two women, Clarice and Alice, are fine this way. Just then, an older mutant student walked over. The older students were taken aback for a moment, then quickly nodded in response. After speaking, Lee Haotian walked towards Aurora's office. Lee Haotian immediately opened the properties and glanced at the panel. After all, this is just the simplest task. Lee Haotian arrived at the office soon. These days, everyone has returned to their normal lives. So why are they so silent now? When he came in and saw Lee Haotian's, his eyebrows twitched, and his eyelids twitched. Just then, Kitty the Phantom Cat spoke up, sounding rather downcast. This question is too heavy for her to answer. Upon hearing Storm's words, Hank was taken aback, but after a moment's thought, he spoke seriously. Stormgirl said in a deep voice, "Anyway, the mutant cure has been developed now. What difference is there between sending them out of school and sending them to their deaths? The person I loved most killed the teacher I respected most. If Xavier College closes, a lot of people will be left homeless. Would it be safer to close the academy and have everyone take the mutant antidote? Now that the opportunity has come, Hank is working so hard. When faced with someone with such high intelligence who is stubborn and fixated on trivial details, any explanation or argument is useless." A terrifying shockwave from the tortoise began to gather in his hand. Just as Hank was feeling confused and uneasy, a beam of blue light, as thick as a water vat, suddenly shot out from Lee Haotian's hand. What is this terrible attack trying to do? Everyone was puzzled, not understanding what Lee Haotian was doing. In an instant, Lee Haotian raised his chi to its maximum level under normal conditions. Everyone was shocked the moment they saw the blue orb of light. The full-powered Kamehameha wave is absolutely destructive. They rushed out and looked up at Lee Haotian in the sky, their eyes filled with shock. Lee Haotian didn't understand why Lee Haotian's attack had hit him. It can gather energy in an instant and increase its power several times over. This also shows how powerful the turtle shockwave is. As long as Lee Haotian am still here, Xavier Academy will not close down. Hank was taken aback by Lee Haotian's words and was slightly confused. Lee Haotian was eager to know what Lee Haotian had just done. When the President of the United States saw Hank return, he asked with some confusion. There was just an unidentified energy attack that swept through the entire city of New York. This is Mexico City, and I'm your good friend Deshaun. Hank took a deep breath, suppressing his shock, before looking at the American president and speaking. After Hank finished relaying the message that Lee Haotian asked him to deliver to the president, their eyes were filled with horror, but even more so with confusion. What's important is Lee Haotian's reasons for doing this. What? Lee Haot smiled, took a sip of coffee, and spoke to Clarice, who was peeling an apple for him. Logan, who was standing next to him, couldn't help but ask. The main theme of this world is still based on the character settings from movies and TV dramas. This is actually a good thing for Lee Haotian. The professor's death will make any forces eyeing Xavier College even more covetous. Only then did everyone realize that the professor had done so much more, without anyone noticing. Let those forces that are stirring up trouble, now that the professor is gone, understand. Those who now harbor ill intentions towards Xavier Academy should be wary. All right, the school should continue with what it needs to do. Lee is right, we can't let the academy fall into chaos. Then, together with Bobby, Logan, Scott, and others, they began to reorganize the academy's schedule. For Lee Haotian, basking in the sun to enhance his strength is the main thing. This person was Melinda May, an agent sent by Child. After a long while, Nick finally spoke. Lee Haotian, who had just taken a sip of cola, couldn't help but spit it out. Wolverine reluctantly took out a tissue and wiped his face. After all, he is still a student, and he hasn't even been enrolled for very long. Auroros, Scott, the three of us have considered it. The college has a fixed income every month. The other party had already set up the company and established a fund long ago. Upon hearing this, Lee Haotian no longer refused. You can gain origin points and restore the power of the rules. This way, we can at least give Storm and the others some explanation. Hey, can you guys please be mindful of the occasion? After all, Rakshasa had been with them for a long time and was also a member of the X-Men. Just then, a loud bang came from the television. These are all mutants. Although they are not very strong, there are many of them. Some used their abilities to break through the police cordon, while others even carried bombs and stormed into the company. Eric immediately opened his arms and spoke with an imposing air. From this moment on, as long as the mutant serum exists, you are enemies of all mutants. It was Jean who killed the professor, fell into chaos, and was then taken away by Magneto.